I guess that's our cue. Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, both to the folks that are here in the room and those who are joining us virtually. We know it's been a very long and intense and kind of action-packed week, so we appreciate you saving some space for us here at the end of the conference. We are here to chat with you today about corporate nonprofit partnerships, and in particularly through the lens of a case study, and that is our collective support for displaced LGBTQ Ukrainians. So we're excited to tell you what we've done and ways that other corporations can think about partnerships. Before we do that though, we will introduce ourselves. I'll just start quickly. I'm Steve Roth. I'm the Executive Director of ORAM, the Organization for Refuge, Asylum, and Migration. I'll tell you about us a little more in a minute, but I'll turn it over to Jilla first.
Hi, I'm Jilla. I'm the European Guide Lead at Alight. Alight is a humanitarian organization that has been around for 40 years. We're in 21 different countries, and I'm one of 3,000 people to call home with Alight. And with that, I'll pass it on to Emily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Emily McDonald. I lead strategic research for Airbnb.org. And I'm really honored to be a part of this panel today with these incredible organizations. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Tilley. I'm a director in our investment bank of Deutsche Bank and commercial real estate lending team. And more important for today's conversation, I'm global chair of DB Pride, which I think everyone here can affectionately know. I'm known as Head Gay. So.
Thanks, and just to tell you a little bit more about ORAM, so we are one of the oldest international nonprofits focused exclusively on the protection and empowerment of LGBT refugees and asylum seekers. We've been around since 2008, so about 14 years. We work primarily in transit countries, so after people have left their country of origin, but before they've reached a resettlement country, so places like Kenya and Mexico. We're doing a lot of work in support of displaced queer Ukrainians in Berlin. We have an office in Germany, so we'll tell you more about that very shortly. But yeah, so we will just jump right in, and I've got the clicker. So before we start the presentations, we did have a poll, so wanted to see if you would mind scanning the code. And the question is, has your company partnered with LGBTQI+ organizations in the past? Yes, regularly, 2 or 3 times. Once, not yet. All right, we'll give people a minute more. Hopefully those connecting online can scan as well. All right, so let's see. Whoops. Hopefully, there we go. Okay, awesome. Well, it looks like the majority, by quite a bit, have, yes, regularly partnered with LGBTQI+ nonprofits, which is great. And then the next highest is 2 or 3 times. So good. So we've got a highly engaged group already, which is excellent. So just to jump in, before we start talking about the specific case and our work around LGBT Ukrainians, wanted to share a little bit more about the unique challenges that LGBTQ+ refugees and asylum seekers face. As one of my colleagues used to say, it's really tough, as a lot of you know, being queer in a lot of different cultures and contexts. It's also extremely difficult being a refugee and the challenges refugees face. But to be an LGBTQ+ refugee is kind of like the perfect storm. The folks that we work with face discrimination and marginalization across multiple identity lines. Of course, their country of origin and oftentimes their language, but also their sexual orientation and their gender identity and their race and other things. So it makes it a really tough group. If you think about refugees and the way kind of refugees normally flee, it's often people are fleeing war or political persecution. It's entire families or communities that leave. LGBT refugees are often fleeing from their families and from their communities, and so they leave without those support structures, and consequently they arrive in places and they're really in need of support from housing to employment to healthcare community. So particular challenges for queer refugees and asylum seekers. Shifting over to Ukraine, everyone of course knows the disaster in Ukraine with Russia's invasion, which started on February 24th. Ukrainians started fleeing in the thousands and ultimately in the millions. There are currently about 8 million displaced Ukrainians outside of Ukraine. In Europe, that's about a fifth of the population. And needless to say, among those are a lot of LGBTQ plus people, again, traveling often without their families and without those support structures and without access to some of the services that are provided through mainstream humanitarian organizations. They just don't reach this population. So that is where we step in, and where we were really pleased to be able to leverage some partnership with some great companies and organizations to support the population there. I mentioned we have an office in Berlin. It's a small office, but we're registered there as well. It gave us kind of a foothold to do some work supporting people there. And while almost all Ukrainians were leaving into Europe, the border countries of Poland, Romania, Hungary, places like this, not a great place to be if you're queer. And so a lot of those folks want to get further west and were particularly interested in Germany. So we had this kind of unique opportunity to support people there. And right at the start of the war, our friends at Alight, which is our parent organization, struck up this partnership with Airbnb.org and Airbnb. And you'll hear more from Emily soon about that. But Airbnb committed to 100,000 supporting or providing housing for 100,000 displaced people. So Alight started doing some work, and through that we got to start providing short-term housing for queer Ukrainians, which is really one of the first needs that people face. We've put people up all over Europe, primarily in Germany though, and we've shifted into a longer-term housing program now as well, which I'll tell you about. But some of the results of this, we've now provided through the Airbnb and Alight partnership over 1,600 nights of housing for displaced queer Ukrainians. That's about 165 people that we've given shelter, which have given people, you know, the opportunity to get settled and to get on their feet. And as the war has dragged on, I will say we've started shifting, and the Airbnb program is they've hit their goal of 100,000 displaced people, and that's going to be wrapping up. And so now we're focused more on longer-term housing. And you know, as I'm sure you've all have seen from the news in the last week or two, Russia's, you know, stepped up its attacks of Ukraine, more, you know, attacking civilian destinations, so more people are fleeing. So this is a longer-term crisis. So we've started providing longer-term housing of 6 months as well in apartments, and then we do case management as well. We're a small organization, so we can't provide all the services, but we connect folks with other organizations that are. So one thing to hear me talk about this work in the third person, but we thought it'd be cool to feature one of the Ukrainians that we have housed through the Airbnb partnership. This is Dima, and Dima is great, young gay guy from Kyiv, and I got to meet him when I was in Berlin a few months ago. He's doing great things there already, and rather than me telling you, let's just hear from him.
My name is Dima. I'm from Ukraine, from Kyiv. It was a crazy story. I've been through the cold river, I've been through the Polish jail. I stayed for a couple days there, and at the end I reached to Berlin. The first time I heard about Oram was actually the first days in Berlin. In 1 week, Oram provided an apartment for me. I moved to first Airbnb, and I even stayed there alone because host left the town, and it was awesome. I stayed for 2 weeks in a good, comfortable apartment. Host even agreed to take me with my cat because I crossed with my cat, and experience was amazing. I'm still in touch with this host, and she's really actually a good friend of mine. It was really an amazing help for me. It was an amazing start because for all of the refugees at this point, housing, I think, is the most complicated question. So without having these apartment questions, I was able to have more time for looking for the job. Yeah, I'm thankful from the bottom of my heart still. And I think that it's an amazing job to give this opportunity for refugees.
Thank you for that. Dima is a pretty amazing guy, and I don't know if you picked up with the beginning of the video when he said he's been through the cold river. So he actually, because sadly the conscription laws couldn't just exit Ukraine, so he swam across the river between Ukraine and Poland and was actually apprehended by Polish police on the other side and imprisoned for a couple of days. So he's been through a lot. As you heard him say, housing is really one of the the top needs for displaced people, particularly in this case. One point I should make is, one of the biggest concerns with when we're talking about LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers is safety, because they are a particularly vulnerable population and face so much discrimination. So that was an important piece of the Airbnb partnership, and being able to verify with hosts that, look, we're going to be booking a trans woman to stay with you, or we're booking a gay guy to stay with you, and making sure everyone's comfortable, and and we really vetted all that to keep people safe. So just shifting gears a little bit, because our work around supporting displaced Ukrainians has been pretty multidimensional. We've also been able to leverage a great partnership with Deutsche Bank, and really kind of started when one of Deutsche Bank's senior executives joined our board earlier this year, which was really great. And I've known John for some time now through past conferences and things. And so Deutsche Bank has now hosted for us 2 different events in support of our work for LGBTQ Ukrainians. One was our Refugee Pride event in New York at their beautiful headquarters overlooking Central Park, and we were able to raise some money to support that work. Deutsche Bank covered all the costs. And then more recently, we had a convening in Berlin. We brought together 20 activists from 10 countries to start working on longer-term strategies, since the war is dragging on and people are going to be there for a lot longer. And so kind of creative different ways for an organization to support us. Deutsche Bank also featured us as their featured nonprofit partner in New York Pride, New York City Pride. So we got incredible exposure and branding there, and the entire focus. In fact, the theme of the name of this event, Rain or Shine, comes from that. We had a tie-in with umbrellas, and the theme of Pride was protecting LGBT refugees, rain or shine. And so it was a really wonderful partnership, and like I said, gave us a lot of exposure. And then just to wrap up, because I want to pass it over to my colleagues here, like I mentioned that we had this convening in Berlin, and we were talking about longer-term solutions and what do organizations need. A lot of the organizations that have stepped up to support queer Ukrainians are just small human rights organizations in places like Poland and Romania. And we got everyone together to talk, how can we do this work longer term? And funding, of course, was the top need. There was a lot of funding pouring in early that it has not lasted, of course, but the needs are still there. And then really more training and expertise in humanitarian assistance, since these, again, are kind of human rights organizations, pride organizations, not experienced in that. And finally, more coordination among all these organizations, because everyone's been working kind of individually in silos. So we still have our work cut out for developing these longer-term solutions, but I think we're on the right track. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jilla, but before, I think we have one more poll. Yes, one more, if you wouldn't mind getting your phones out again. This one is, has your company taken action to support LGBTQI plus Ukrainians specifically? And this is, I'm happy to say that we've actually had a number of companies that have stepped up in different ways, from hosting lunch and learns to doing fundraising within their organizations to support our work with LGBTQ Ukrainians. We have now some of our clients are participating in mentorship programs in Germany, so that's been really exciting. And let's see. Oh wow, about half have supported LGBTQ plus Ukrainians. Yay, which is amazing. Excellent. All right, with that, I'll pass it over. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Steve mentioned that Alight has been responding to the Ukrainian crisis, and we were able to forge a partnership with Airbnb.org. And we've been so happy to be able to partner with ORAM to make sure that the most vulnerable refugee, LGBTQI+, have been able to have the support that they really need to be placed in safe cities and have connection points to help them thrive, not only survive, but thrive in their new locations. So what sets Alight apart from other humanitarian organizations, I would say, is that we're really nimble. We're a medium-sized organization when it comes to the humanitarian field. Like I mentioned, we have 3,000 staff, but we have 40 years of experience. We have not had experience in Poland. So when the crisis happened, we really had to do an assessment of what were the needs. So in the first few days of the war, end of February, we deployed a team to really do research. This research helped us inform and co-create with the Ukrainian refugees on what should our response look like. And from that response, we developed 3 main pillars of our work. The first pillar really has to resonate with one of our core values called do the doable. So I think when people typically think of humanitarian work, they think of Rwanda, Uganda, traditional settlements, and camps. Yes, this is true for a majority of refugees around the world, but we're seeing more and more urban and displaced populations just happening based on crisis and climate change and economic pressures. And so do the doable tackles really large problems, like what we could think of hunger in places like Darfur, and break them down into smaller steps of there's immediate action that we can take right now to help that person in front of us, to help the 50 in front of us. Let's not get slowed down and clogged because we're waiting for $1 million proposal. So what did that look like for our work along the Ukrainian border and in Poland? Well, we were able, on the first few weeks of our research, to see what was actually happening, who was responding. We saw an outpour of Poland organizations really rise up and meet the needs, nonprofits, traditional NGOs, new NGOs, and volunteers from all around the world kind of coming together. I call it like a festival of nations almost. And also Ukrainian organizations that were working on the inside, supporting their own people. Who is going to have the most impact and have the most drive to work in the hardest hours and under the highest pressures? The local community, the host community who's receiving, and those that are like actually affected. So we were able to see what was the need of those organizations that were responding. It wasn't technical expertise. They had many years of doing that type of work. But it really was the funding. They were seeing 8 million of people influx coming into the country, and they had to meet those demands. So as our ability of seeing where the gaps were, we were like, okay, we will do grant program with our Do the Doable and fund grants between $10,000 to $50,000 and really help them to be able to support the next wave of refugees as they came through. Projects looked like within Ukraine supporting water supply, to in Poland working with Catholic sisters that were converting their convent into a resettlement home for 40 refugees. The second pillar was guiding to safety. I think everybody kind of remembers on the news we were seeing streams of people crossing in by foot, by car, by train, and who's mainly coming? Who is allowed to leave Ukraine? There's martial law there, so mainly it was women and children and extremely vulnerable people, just like LGBTQI population. And they're coming and they're leaving their social networks behind. At the best, they were able to grab, their car full of stuff, and at the worst, they were leaving with just what was in their hands. But they weren't able to bring the people and the social network that really helps someone thrive in their community. So in doing that assessment, we're like, protection needs are a really big issue. We were seeing players taking advantage of very vulnerable people, very scary situations of people being trafficked. We were working with UNHCR about child protection. And one of the solutions that we came up with, and this was at the same time that we were able to kind of forge this partnership with Airbnb.org, was providing a safe piece of home for someone. Take the financial burden out of that, get them off the streets, and allowing them to have a soft landing of where they can really process what just happened to them. We were meeting thousands of people who couldn't even spell their first name. The trauma, the stress, and then having to decide, where am I going to? Poland and Ukraine are neighbors, but culturally they're similar. They have different languages, and they have, one country is in the EU and one's not. The process of navigating that system is really difficult under normal circumstances. And so because we, like I mentioned, are nimble and have many years of experience, we were like, how can we respond in a unique way? Other organizations are working with Airbnb.org. Yes, they are. And so we were like, well, what can we do to fill this gap that we're seeing on top of housing? So we really built a program around how is home and community built around a home piece, and how can we develop a team that would respond to that. I'll touch a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. But through our partnership with Airbnb.org, we realized that it allowed us to be a little bit more creative in the way that we would traditionally work when you're working with humanitarian donors that have a lot of restrictions on how you would manage those funds. And with that, we built this very novel program, which has been something that Alight's been wanting to do since 2015. We've been hearing this feedback, our guide program. But with Airbnb.org, we were able to make touch points with over 7,000 people, and we were able to house people for 25,000 nights of safety. And then our third pillar, as everyone's kind of looking into this protracted conflict, is more the mid to long term. Another value is find others. And we were co-creating, so what does that mean? We're actually designing with refugees in Poland to develop what is it that you need once you have made Poland your home. You've kind of come to the realization you can't come back for various reasons. And we designed this program with mothers, and it's really just community centers where people can not only find legal support and job support, but also develop community with Polish hosts, but also with Ukrainians that have been resettled. And so we're launching this next phase of our program. When we talk about where are we working, you can see along on this map here that we have teams in Lviv all the way to Berlin. This has been done on purpose. We're really along the artery of the migrant journey. Lviv and Przemysl is where the major border crossing is, and we first had done our assessment there, and we're in all these vital dynamic points where refugees are actually coming and going. Our guides live, I had mentioned we're building this program around Airbnb.org as one of our main services of providing safety with home, but we also are doing much more than that. So we have a team of guides. They're placed in these strategic locations, ORAM in Berlin, so we're able to connect even that way. And we're able to have our guides really be this social network. And what do I mean by that? So our guides live, work, and live in these locations, and with that are able to build these regional resource hubs. They're able to be a connection point. They speak Ukrainian. That's one of the biggest things that we saw was a lack. So they speak Ukrainian. Many of them are refugees from the 2014 situation in Crimea and the current conflict, so they know how to help their people. Let's talk a little bit about what does that look like. So in the virtual space, we're meeting refugees. Ukrainians are really interconnected with digital spaces on Telegram, crowdsourcing of information, but there was a lot of misinformation. So we wanted to create a safe space with digital guides. And in the digital guide space, we have recommended cities. Recommended cities have become really crucial for meeting people that don't really know how to navigate Poland, and particularly LGBTQI plus resources where there's safe spaces that people could be directed to. And so people can go on our recommend cities. They can find our locations of where we work, so they can physically meet with a guide. They can also read about our guides and then ask any other questions that don't have to do about housing, that we will help them with their next step. We are also meeting them in physical places like the train station. Here you see Nina meeting with newly arrived refugees. She's able to do insta-booking, asking in the Ukrainian language directly, like, how can we help you? Do you have a place to stay? And then do insta-booking immediately there, and then they're able to be in a safe space. We're also in traditional spaces like reception centers. This is along the Przemysl border, along the Ukraine and Poland border. We had mentioned that these traditional spaces allow people to be in these locations for 28 to 48 hours, just enough to, okay, what's my next move? Our guides are there to really help place them and recommend cities. And then we're in vital transit hubs, like distribution points that might pop up, or bus stations. And then I had mentioned that we're in these physical spaces, but what are we doing in these physical spaces? We're really trained our group of 13 guides on psychological first aid. People who are coming to us are very traumatized, and so how do we meet them in where they are, and what's their next step? That's just enough to help them really give feedback on what are their major needs, And we're able to do this through Kuja Kuja, one of our other partner organizations. It's the world's first refugee feedback system. And we're able to take that information and really pivot where are the most resources needed and do quick impact projects. We're also then with Airbnb allowed to give them a service right off the bat. Airbnbs are great because they allow people to have kitchens. They're more like a home. It's meeting people with dignity, right? Instead of in a hotel room where it's like someone is really feeling like they are either on vacation, which they're not, or this is extremely temporary, and you might not be able to fit your whole family. Having a whole apartment allows you to have your fur friend, allows you to have your children with you, and just have, like I mentioned, a soft landing to really process your current reality. And once people have kind of had the 2 weeks to a 1 month stay, they're able to come back to us in these physical locations, and we're able to reorientate them on, okay, what's your next step? Is your next step to stay in Poland or to move on? Okay, now you want to find a job. Here are the cities we recommend for this type of service that service industry that you work in Poland. So the three combined help us to really continue to have this touch point with our guide program, but it's been built around research and empathy and years of experience, but also with providing a little piece of home with Airbnb.org. I've talked a lot. I wanted to play a video of Inha, one of our guides in Wrocław. She actually received an Airbnb stay from us, from our guide Bodan, and then after 1 month was like, you know what, I can do that job. Will you hire me? So we hired her, and she couldn't make it out to this conference, so we wanted to play a little video of her talking about her experience.
I like this city. When I have bad mood, I can just go through the streets looking for people and enjoy with this ancient architecture, and it gives me energy to continue my way. I'm Ukrainian. I come from Khmelnytsky city. It's in the west of Ukraine. I was working with cosmetics and perfumes. I'm single, but I have a lot of friends in Khmelnytsky. When the war started, most of my friends, I mean women, took their children and moved abroad. At the first day of war, we didn't know what to do. How safe can we be in our place? All my friends, all my family was shocked and terrified. I had to leave my family, my friends, everything I love, move to another country, and it was a really high level of anxiety. I didn't know what to do. The biggest challenges in Poland was to find accommodation and job, and I guess it's not only for me but for all Ukrainians here. When I was looking for apartment and job, I met a light, and at the beginning they provided me with apartment for 1 month staying, and it was really like a miracle in my life because I lost all hope to find something, and after some moment I got a job also with a light and started to help people and to use my own experience in order to support Ukrainians. I can be really helpful for them because I know their feelings, I know their emotions, I know their fears. Communication with people that have the same experience as I have also heal myself. So they come to us directly from the train and they need some place for staying, and this program and this accommodation that Airbnb provide for people is really important. So first 2 weeks people can relax a bit, maybe take a rest and create their next step in Poland.
Thank you. And I was going to be really excited about all that applause. I told her I'd give her feedback. So if you're looking for a nimble organization that really is, co-creative with the actual clients that we serve, shoot me an email and let's see what we can do together. And with our wonderful team, like people like Inga, like the world's our oyster.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm from Airbnb.org, and everything that we've done for the Ukraine response, I think you have just heard from our incredible partners at Aram and Alight, truly the folks on the ground doing this work. So thank you so much for those. I want to share a little bit more about Airbnb.org, partly just to inspire other companies about new ways that potentially they can get involved. So the spark for Airbnb.org started all the way back in 2012, and we had a host of ours named Shell, who was in New York during Hurricane Sandy, and she wrote to us and she said, I would really love to be able to host someone in my apartment for free that's been impacted by the storm. But at the time, there was really no way to do that on our platform. So a group of dedicated volunteers got together, worked throughout the night, and basically came up with a prototype for what would eventually become Airbnb.org. So in the years since then, we've really focused on providing temporary housing for folks in crisis, especially around these two areas. The first is folks who've been displaced by disaster around the world, and the second are folks who've been displaced by conflict. And so that's included folks displaced from Syria, from Venezuela, and more recently, of course, Afghanistan and Ukraine. In 2020, Airbnb.org became its own independent nonprofit organization. And our mission is to unlock the power of everyday people sharing space, resources, and support in times of need. So how we work. The first way is we partner with incredible nonprofit organizations like Aram and Alight, and we give them grants so they can then book Airbnb.org housing on behalf of those that they're serving. And we also open up access to discounted and free housing that's provided by our larger host community. The second piece we're really focused on is investing in equity, so finding these incredible organizations that are in fact centering and advancing equity in their own communities. And the third is really understanding what's the impact of Airbnb.org stays in this longer journey of someone who's been displaced. And I think Jilla spoke to this so beautifully. But we do think there is something special about having access to a home, having access to a space with those amenities of home, right? It's a kitchen where you can cook a meal. It's a dining room table where you can gather your family. It's space for children to play. And all of these things we've heard add just a moment of normalcy in an otherwise really difficult time and give people, as you said so beautifully, that moment to pause, to just rest and to kind of prepare for next steps. The other piece that we're really excited about that's unique is some of the connections that are made between guests and their hosts. So as Steve pointed out with Mary and Dima, you see moments where folks form a friendship that goes beyond that initial stay. And we think hosts can play an important role in providing an extra layer of support, being a person in community who offers a warm welcome and who is able to help do things like navigate bureaucracy, show them around the city, bring them to a medical appointment, or just those things that start to build connection and belonging in a new place. Here's our team from a recent offsite. Ashana's in there. Just wanted to show this because I think it's really interesting. Our team is this kind of strange hybrid between a product team and an operations team. So we've got all the folks that you'd expect on a technical, tech team. We've got, engineers and designers and researchers and content writers and PMs. But you also have this operations team where there's folks that come with deep expertise in emergency response and partnership management. We have an entire customer support team that has specialized in trauma-informed support. So this is kind of the unique team that we've built up to support this work. And when a crisis like in Ukraine happens, one of the first things we can do is really build and design product and stand it up. So here's a landing page and a sign-up flow so that very quickly folks can go ahead and raise their hands and say, I want to help out by opening my home to someone in need. And in addition to the products that we build, we also have these, I think, operational advantages that we provide. So things like the customer support that I mentioned, or for example, insurance. So if something goes wrong, like something breaks or a bathroom floods during the stay, it can be us and not the host or the guest or the partner that covers that cost. So in the Ukraine response to date, as mentioned, through our partners and our trusted entities, over 100,000 Ukrainians who are displaced have been housed, and that includes 48,000 hosts who have who've offered up their homes for temporary stays. We've partnered with 40 humanitarian organizations around the world and provided housing to folks that have been displaced in 90 countries and regions. I want to touch on just a few incredible opportunities I had to actually go out and spend some time with these teams, observing the work that they do firsthand. My research background, I have a PhD in anthropology, so for me, I've got to be on the ground, seeing something in real life, and I think those observations can really help to improve the program and the product that we create. So this was last April. I had the great opportunity to travel to the Polish-Ukraine border and to spend time with Jilla's team there and really get to observe, especially the work that the housing guides that she was talking about, Nina and Vika, were doing on the ground. Here we are shadowing Vika all day in a train station and just watching as she does this incredible work of going, talking to families, getting their needs assessed, figuring out, precisely when and where they'd like to go, and then being able to actually make a booking through Airbnb.org to provide that safe housing. We are also really inspired by the way that Alight got the word out about the program in really creative ways. They are always doing the doable, and that just helped us start to think, where in this overall journey could something like Airbnb.org be most impactful? Also had the really great pleasure to go to Berlin and spend time with Steve's team there with O&ESummit2022. And there it was incredible. Again, part of it is just us sitting with them and watching as they're doing these bookings. And as you can imagine, some things go really well, some things not so much. So I'm taking tons of notes to bring back to our team and say, how can we actually improve this tool so that our partners can use this and it can be even easier, especially because they have so much work that they are handling. Steve's team also did a really great job of just making the opportunity for us to meet a few of the folks that they had served, and that was incredibly meaningful for us. So I don't have a picture of them, but they were just showing us on their phone, like, when I arrived in Berlin, I hopped on Telegram, here's how I started looking for housing, and just walking us through their journey of what does it mean to show up young in a city you've never been to, not even have a place to stay, how they found O&ESummit2022, how they found Airbnb.org housing, and what's happened in their journey since. While we were in Berlin, we also had the opportunity to do some research with Airbnb.org hosts. And these are, of course, folks who are just incredibly passionate and stand up and really want to go above and beyond to help the folks that are, staying with them. And so, examples of taking them on the subway, taking them to medical appointments, and all this incredible work that I think can happen when a host really goes above and beyond. And I think what's special there is just this idea of a foothold effect. So what is possible? What gets opened up when they suddenly have a point of connection and a point in their new community? Okay, and finally, I think one of the things our team is so passionate about is storytelling and being able to use the power of storytelling to raise awareness more broadly and to build support for these efforts. So you'll recognize Dima here, and this is him with his host, Mary. Our team traveled to Berlin, and these are behind-the-scenes shots of the shoot where they made just a small film, documenting their experience. I'm very sad to say that the film is not quite ready. It will be ready on the Airbnb.org website probably in December or so, but please look out for that. I want to share just one example of, I think, the kind of storytelling our team does to really amplify these issues more broadly.
In Poland, we were shocked. The story of war in Europe is in our genes, in our memories. To lose your home is one of the worst things. I really wanted to help. I learned about Airbnb.org at the right moment, and to host refugees was incredible.
But let me just take a minute and say thank you for all the work you all do. That was really inspiring and amazing to hear, and I've learned all about this partnership and journey just preparing for this panel, so thank you. I'll also surprise you that the banker doesn't have slides, unlike our nonprofit and Airbnb. So I just want to take a step back and just talk about how we got involved. And we're also very grateful and honored just to be amongst such people who are doing such amazing direct-to-consumer work. So I think I met Steve originally in Berlin. So obviously there's a huge German connection here. In 2019, we used what's called our Palais Populaire. Deutsche Bank is actually the largest private collector of art. And we have a museum of modern art in Berlin. And the United Nations came to us and they said, hey, we want to host a convening of nonprofits. They sat down with business leaders, figuring out how the business community could help NGOs from around the world. And given a lot of this work does happen in Eastern Europe, supporting Africa, Germany is just an easier place to get to than maybe Las Vegas or New York, where a lot of us are privileged to be or live. And that convening, we met a ton of great people, including Steve. And then subsequently, when they came to us, I don't know how many people are involved in their ERG here. I'm assuming everyone has some involvement. Right, so planning Pride is actually a lot of work. And in all the panels I've heard all week, it's like, go outside of Pride. But sometimes it's sort of important to double down on it. And so every year, Deutsche Bank doesn't really, we don't sell anything like some of our competitors to the open public, particularly the United States, right? In Germany, we do. And so we've always used our privilege, our power, our brand new office, our position in New York City Pride to give it to an organization that a lot of people probably haven't heard of before. And so Steve came to us through Origin and our friend Christian and said, hey, we want to do some things together. And so it was interesting because there's this company called Rentbrella that was coming to us at the same time. So if anyone's heard of it, it's not a commercial for Rentbrella. But I thought it was a cool concept if it's like City Bike, except so it's raining, and you take an umbrella from your office, you get to use it. If it's free, if you bring it back, and then you bring it back a day later, it's totally free. And it's a total ESG kind of thing because if you look at the stats, and I'm going to get them wrong because I don't work for them, but it's like you can fill the Eiffel Tower 18 times with umbrellas that people throw out. And so the whole point is to get you to take the umbrella and bring it back. And so we created these rainbow umbrellas. I should have brought one today, but here it doesn't really rain that often in Vegas. I'd say just like the theme of today's panel, rain or shine. So as Steve said, we have protecting LGBTQ refugees, rain or shine. And as I'm sure anyone who's involved in your ERG, as much as we put planning into Pride out at the start, it always changes as we go on, right? So we started with our theme, which was celebrating queer spaces, and became more about either creating or doing things. So we did all kinds of things, but most importantly, we were able to host the ORAM donor reception in our brand new office. It was probably the coolest moment for me. We did something like 25 Pride events in the month of June, but hearing Dominique Jackson, who you saw on Steve's slide, who that we all knew and got connected to, telling her story, not only at a Deutsche Bank podium, but in front of what's called Billionaires Row, which is Central Park South. And in her speech, which I wish we could have showed you video, but it was probably too long for an hour-long format, she brought up each member of her chosen family. And so you got to imagine, at Deutsche Bank, it was probably half, bankers and people who have no idea what's really going on. They're just here for the free drinks. Another half was like the activist community. And seeing that all come together in front of that was really cool. And then for us, Pride is always, a celebration, mostly an employee engagement experience. And so we had this crazy idea to print these umbrellas and march down Fifth Avenue with them. And so it turned out to be an accident, but we deployed thousands of umbrellas, and you could sort of see our contingent coming. And I think what's special about what Deutsche Bank does or we did for this Pride, is it wasn't about our logo, right? It was all of our logos up there, pretty much in equal size, and it didn't actually rain, though we did have confetti cannons, which were super fun. But it was so sunny. These umbrellas also happen to be sun protection. And it was kind of cool to see my colleagues and everyone singing to It's Raining Men while spinning their rainbow umbrellas down Fifth Avenue. It was just sort of a cool moment, right? Because you see a lot of corporates are very strategic and they're trying to sell things. We were just like, we're just here to have a good time, which I feel bad being on this panel because everything you said was so serious and so important. But it's also important, help raise awareness for some nonprofits. And that's what we do with our Pride partnership with ORM. We're super proud of it. And it came together again. So over the course of June, we celebrated queer spaces in all kinds of ways. I don't know if for all of you, I saw Piranha last night, where we've been every week, but we also opened like Boxers for the first time, which is a gay bar in New York City, and brought a ton of people there, right? But for us, it was really important to do that, and then we continued in announcing in July 1st, much like the panel I was just on with Pepsi and others. We didn't stop there. So we provided our Palais Populaire again to ORAM to have that convening that Steve so eloquently talked about. It's a really exciting program, and I think from an ERG perspective, I know we all struggle with budget and other things, and how do you get things done? And just being able to provide your corporate space is a pretty good way to do it. We do it all over the world and hosting both public and secret meetings and backdoor advocacy and things like that. So it's just a super cool way, and I'm honored to be on this panel, but also here to help, show that, sometimes we do things where it's just something as simple as helping provide a room in a strategic country or city like Berlin is, really powerful to nonprofits and an easy way to get things done from an ERG. I think I'll give it back to Steve.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And it's a good segue, John, into we've got some time for Q&A now, but just for a couple minutes before that, because I this all kind of leads to, well, how can we get engaged, or how can our corporation or individuals get engaged? And there are a lot of different ways, and so we just want to highlight a few. Kind of the whole panel was about in-kind donations of various sorts, things that, products or services that your company offers that could really help displaced LGBT people. John was just talking about providing space for activities and events that's got an actual, kind of monetary value to us. Technical assistance is a big one. A lot of you that are either tech companies or financial services companies can do this and have done this. We were a beneficiary of JP Morgan's Force for Good program. Super grateful. They helped us completely redesign our website and create a platform for engagement for a number of different audiences. And then they've also supported us financially in other programs in other parts of the world. Sharing employee expertise. There are the folks we work with, of course, are spread around the world, but we've done some great virtual mentorship programs and trainings and leadership programs with companies like Salesforce, with Microsoft, and others. So there are great opportunities there. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about funding. That's a key piece, obviously, for us to be able to do our work. We get all of our income from donations, grants, what have you. But we've discovered that there are creative ways that companies can even support in that way, like the matching, the company matching grant. It's particularly around our Ukraine work has been really effective. A lot of your companies have foundations. That can be another source. So those are a few. And then, of course, John was talking about Pride, and there are a lot of engagement opportunities around Pride that can either bring exposure or other kinds of support. So those were just a few of the areas that we wanted to point out. But we'd love to open it up to questions and see what you all, either what you're doing or any questions you have about what we've been doing. So, and then I think we've got microphones coming around. Okay, we've got one back there, and then we'll come up here.
Hello, my name is Ruben Villegas. I'm with Marsh McLennan. Pronouns are he, him, his. My question is to Airbnb.org. Are all the people or hosts that are stepping up, are they already hosts of Airbnb, or are you targeting? Are these new people coming into the mix?
Thank you so much for that question. Yes, it is a mix of different folks who provide housing. So, for example, when we do a grant to an organization like ORAM or Alight, they can then search in a variety of hosts and use that grant money to book directly with any host that has, let's say, the best house that really fits the needs in the location where it needs to be. At the same time, as you saw with the product that we stood up, we really do try to reach and encourage all folks to join Airbnb.org. So it could be existing Airbnb hosts that were like, I never knew I could just open my home and host, and that could be a way to help out. Or it could be people who've never hosted for Airbnb before that are just interested in hosting for this one specific cause. So it's a complex mix, but I think the main piece is that this is really fueled by the generosity of the host community.
Hi, stand up, I guess. Hi, Thornell Hambro, JP Morgan Chase, pronouns he, him. So maybe it's a question more for Alight and ORAM, but have you done any analysis on the career profiles of these refugees, what sort of careers they left, what they might be looking for, and is that a way that corporations can help provide career expertise or career preparedness, etc.?
Yes, we have. First question is, where can I sleep? The second question is, how can I get out of here and actually start generating income? I think it's quite a difficult situation because of how Ukraine and the EU are set up for qualifications. Ukrainians are extremely educated, but some of the professional degrees that might follow them aren't to the standard of EU, so sometimes they have to take additional courses or need to kind of have that diploma translated essentially with all their credentials. So we kind of broken it up into two ways. We think of survival jobs, and then we think of dream jobs. And sometimes someone's survival job is another person's dream job. But when you're having highly technical people that come, sometimes it's just getting them to make that first connection. So either they're doing that through hosts, or they're doing that through our guides in locations that are able to connect them with other businesses. Or I would say the Polish people really opened up their businesses, particularly in hospitality and with tourism in the summer, to be able to put people into jobs right away. But it's been an issue, and it will be this is a long-term thing as well, right? We didn't have a great focus on that with our work because it was through housing, but also through our guide program, we've been able to help people start making connections.
And I would just add to that, Thornall, that while we haven't done specific research that's drilled down into kind of career backgrounds of the folks that we've served, we have, just as Jill has said, that job is the next most important thing or next biggest priority after housing. So we have started focusing on that and providing support around that as well. We are partners with the Tent Partnership for Refugees, and we wrote a guide on corporate mentorship programs for LGBT refugees. We happen to just have done a German version of that, and so the program has been rolled out in Germany, and a number of our clients in Berlin are now part of that mentorship program, which will connect them with companies and resources and individuals, and chance to build skills. Another key piece of the housing that's connected to job is that so a lot of people want to be in Germany, and the way that the Temporary Protection Directive works, technically Ukrainians in Europe, they're not refugees, they have the special status, which means they can live there, they can work in any country in the EU that they want to, but then countries, especially like Germany, that have such a big influx, are trying to manage where people are. And naturally, queer people want to be in a big city like Berlin, where they can be with community and services that they need. And the only way they can do that is if they have, if they are registered to live there. So if they have their name on a lease, which is why we've started shifting into the longer-term housing program. So it's kind of a multi-step process. So people get registered, as Jill has said, then they may do kind of survival jobs or basic jobs at first. But a lot of the folks, at least anecdotally, that we've worked with, are quite skilled and are interested in getting back into the field that they've been involved in.
And then as we think into long term, we have this opportunity now in the United States for a program called United for Ukraine. And so that's able to help sponsorship of people coming who want to be resettled in the United States. It's a 2-year program. So Alight has been working with corporations to see how can corporations become these sponsor circles, and then also have income kind of tied into that sponsorship. So not only are they getting someone who's sponsoring and filling out all the federal paperwork that's needed, but also helping them once they get their work visa or their green card, they're getting work authorization expedited for this special population, that then they're able to place them at a job right away.
Good question in the back.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. You talked a little bit about what things that companies can do. I'm wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about kind of the biggest faux pas or kind of not ideal approaches that you see from corporate partners that want to start partnering with you, just so we all can be aware of maybe what not to do.
All the companies we work with have been great. So, faux pas. Can you think of any?
Yes, I can. I think particularly with the Ukraine crisis, there was an outpouring of openness for a slew of reasons. We're working all around the world, and the amount of response we had from private corporations wanting to partner with us was unbelievable. Especially as an implementer, to be told, you don't have to worry about a budget. We've got it, right? That's really amazing. But also I would say in the tech industry, it's quite interesting to see how people responded in this crisis, in this international crisis. I would say for me, in my young career as being a humanitarian, it was the first time seeing such an outpour from that community. I think that what was special with our partnership with Airbnb.org is that they had support for our teams when their product wasn't working well, and we could give feedback, and they were in live time responding to it. I would say some other tech didn't, and it made it really difficult when we were trying to work with extremely vulnerable populations. So everyone who's a refugee is vulnerable, but we have different categories of vulnerability within that population. And I would say like elderly people didn't know how to use certain apps, right? And so if you're trying to use your current technology to meet a need, be flexible to opening and meeting for who your client is, because that client's gonna be very different than your everyday user of your products. So I would just say be flexible, work with your implementing partners, and really keep who's your client, if that's a refugee or whoever it is, at the forefront.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate that point, displaced people, obviously by their nature, are spread out all over the world, and sometimes we've been approached by companies that want to have their local employee in Boise be a volunteer, and it's not, unfortunately, we don't have like soup kitchens where people can go to. And so as long as companies are willing to be creative and virtual engagement opportunities, we do a lot of work on the Mexico-US border, and we brought corporate partners down there. Microsoft came down and did a training across the border with us, folks from their Southern California offices. So there are different ways, but like Jilla said, companies have to just be a little more creative, open to different ideas. So we have a couple of questions from our virtual audience. The first one is actually for you, Emily, for Airbnb.org. Have you considered other types of emergency situations that lead to folks experiencing temporary homelessness or second stage housing as shelters become more full?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. Our team has definitely done a lot of thinking around, in what situations it makes sense to leverage Airbnb.org and where it may not just be the right tool for that particular situation. So even in our own history, we've had, different pieces. We had a big response, for example, with medical workers traveling for COVID and other sorts of pieces that you may remember. But more recently, we've really focused in, and we think that in particular, temporary housing for folks displaced by disaster or temporary housing for those displaced by conflict is really where we're able to kind of leverage our resources best. But it's a great question. I think it's one that we'll continue to come back to, in the years.
Great. And then we had another virtual question. Do you have a blueprint for how to hire these displaced people of our community? So I can start on that one at least. I don't know if it's a blueprint per se, but we have some approaches that we've been using in different countries. I think sometimes it depends on context. We do a lot of work in Kenya where our economic empowerment work is most advanced. There are a lot of challenges to queer refugees entering the workforce there. So we've really focused a lot on training and seed funding for people to open their own businesses, kind of micro businesses. And that's been both skills training and business training, and then again, competitive seed funding process. We have discovered that that folks need longer term kind of job training, skills training, even kind of tech schools and programs. So we've been putting people in more of those types of programs as well. And then I think the corporate mentorship programs, like the one I mentioned with Tent and in Germany, that's another piece that can be really helpful.
Hello, my name is Martin Gejo. I use he, him pronouns. My question is, if you have the feedback from the LGBTI refugees, can you share how do they feel in Poland, whether they feel welcomed there in the communities? And my second question would be, do you know whether they consider Poland and these mentioned cities just as a stop-by station for them, and they want to continue to Germany, or not? Thank you.
So I can share a little bit on that. I think there's a mix of both. Poland, of course, by far was the largest kind of recipient country or country that folks entered into. Some have stayed. There's shared similar languages and cultures. And we know we partner with a couple of Polish NGOs, LGBT NGOs that provide support and services. But a lot of folks want to get to some place where they have more opportunity, like Germany. And there are a couple pieces or layers to that. One is that, well, since they have Ukrainians have the right to be in any country in the EU, each country has kind of a different social support network, and Germany has one of the most robust. So that better social benefits just overall. So that's one reason. And then the other is just the LGBTQ friendliness of Germany, and particularly big cities like Berlin that attract people. We don't yet have data where that's something we're going to work on this year in terms of where the bulk of queer Ukrainians are, outside of Ukraine right now.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. I think the majority of the population we worked with, they left family members back home. They're incomplete families coming into the European Union. And so they want to stay as close as possible, but where there's the most opportunity. And throughout the kind of response, saturation in Poland, saturation in Germany became a real thing. So people had to start navigating other places. So that's why it was really important for our guides when we were creating our program to really make sure we were hunting out, like, where are there safe shelters for LGBTQI people? Like, Poland, in some places it's not safe. So this is why, like, the recommended city became a really big concept for us, and then partnering with ORAM really to help them have special casework, right? More attention than maybe our guides were when they're meeting hundreds and hundreds of people, but maybe someone that they're encountering could need maybe days, weeks of support that our guides couldn't necessarily provide. That was not specialized.
Thank you. It's a quick question for you, Emily. So are you over-indexed now in terms of properties available in Airbnb.org, or would it be helpful for our corporations to promote across our employees the fact that they can, offer up their places?
Oh, it's such a great question. Yeah, I think the response is clear. Yeah, absolutely welcome collaboration and amplification of these efforts. So thank you so much for the question.
Awesome. That's a nice positive note to end on if we don't have any other questions.